Imagine you are playing a game of hide and seek in a giant old house with hundreds of rooms. You find the perfect spot to hide, but then someone locks the door from the outside. You are stuck, but you are also left wondering who locked it and why. Was it a mistake? Was it a rule you didn't know about? Or did you accidentally lock it yourself while you were busy looking at other things? Today we are talking about a real-life prince named Harry and a real-life giant house called Buckingham Palace. This morning the news told a story about a door being open, but by lunch the door was slammed shut. It is a mystery filled with secrets, missed deadlines, and a very important clock that is ticking for everyone to hear. If you want to know why a prince cannot sleep in his own father's house, you have to look at the tiny details that most people miss. We are going to look at the timeline, the rules of being a king, and a big court case that changed everything. By the end, you will see that this isn't just a story about a family fight. It is a story about how being a royal is like playing a game where the rules are written in invisible ink, and if you don't read them carefully, you might find yourself locked out in the cold. Early this morning, a famous news channel told the whole world some very big news. They announced that Prince Harry would be staying at Buckingham Palace while he was visiting London. This felt like a very happy story. It made it sound like the family was getting back together and that everything was going to be okay. But by the time people were sitting down to eat their lunch, the palace sent out a message that said the exact opposite. They said no, Prince Harry would not be staying there at all. This big piece of news only lived for 3 hours. That is how long the biggest royal secret of the week survived before the people at the palace shot it down in public. In the mess of those 3 hours, we can see everything that has been happening for the last month. We can see the facts, the times, and the truth that nobody can deny anymore. The real story today is not just that a door was closed in Prince Harry's face. The real story is that we can now watch, minute by minute, exactly how that door came to be closed. And when you see the whole timeline laid out in front of you, you will find that the hand on the door was not the one that everyone is trying to blame. Before we dive into the details, we have to look at 2 important loops. A loop is like a circle that brings you back to where you started. This time, both of these loops are like clocks that are ticking very loudly. The first loop is a single sentence. It is hidden deep inside a very long and official message sent out by Prince Harry's own team this afternoon. His team was very angry when they wrote it. They wanted to blame the palace for being mean. But if you read that sentence very slowly and carefully, you will see a quiet confession. A confession is when someone admits they did something wrong. In that one sentence, Harry's team actually admits that the palace was right the whole time. I'm going to read you that sentence later and show you the secret hiding inside it. The second loop is an actual clock. It is set for 2:00 tomorrow afternoon in the City of London. That is when a judge in a high court will give a final answer in a big legal battle Harry has been fighting for years. I'm going to show you why that clock, and not any rules about bedsheets or cleaners, is the real reason there will be no prince sleeping at Buckingham Palace tonight. Everything else people are talking about is just like extra furniture in a room. The clock is the room itself. Let us put the story back together hour by hour. The timeline of when things happened is the most important part of the story, and nobody else is going to explain it to you in an honest way. We have to start on Friday. According to the people who work for the king, Friday was the final deadline. The king had offered Harry a place to stay at Buckingham Palace weeks ago. But a palace is not like a normal house where you can just show up and sleep on the couch. It is a very busy place with lots of rules. Because it is a working royal home, you have to plan everything in advance. You need people to cook food, people to clean the rooms, and police officers to stand guard to keep everyone safe. All of that work has to be set up days before a guest arrives. The palace said they needed an answer by Friday so they could get everything ready. Friday came and Friday went, but Harry did not say yes. Then came Saturday, and this is where the 2 sides of the story start to look very different. It is important to look at both versions of what happened next. The version from the palace says that on Saturday, Harry actually said no thank you to the offer. Then just a few hours later, they say he changed his mind and tried to say yes. But by then, the palace workers told him it was too late. They said the people who were supposed to work and guard the room had already been told they weren't needed anymore. The machine that makes the palace run had already been turned off. Now, let's look at the version from Harry's side. His team sent out a statement saying that Harry spent all of last week trying to find other ways to stay safe because he was unhappy with the security rules. They said that once he found another way to be safe, he was finally able to say yes to the palace over the weekend. I want you to remember that phrase, over the weekend. It is the sentence I promised you, and we will come back to it soon because it is very important. Then came Monday morning, which is today. This is when everything started to fall apart in front of the whole world. Harry's team told their favorite news reporters that everything was fine. They said Harry had accepted the offer and would definitely be staying at Buckingham Palace. They even said he had been talking directly with his father, the king. One TV channel was so happy to have this news that their royal reporter looked very excited on air. He described the palace as the most important building in the country, protected by guards with guns, and the safest place in the United Kingdom. He painted a picture of Harry staying just a short walk away from his father's house in freshly cleaned rooms. For 3 hours, it was a very sweet story about a son being under his father's roof again. But then the palace spoke and that sweet story died. The news anchor had to come back on TV and tell everyone that the palace said the story was not true. They said Harry missed the deadline, said no, and then changed his mind when it was already too late. The newsreader had to keep a very serious face while saying that Harry's office still claimed their version was the right one. Later this afternoon, Harry's team sent out a very angry statement. It is rare for them to send out official messages like this, and even rarer for them to be this mad. The statement says they are very disappointed. It blames Buckingham Palace for taking away the offer at the very last minute. It says that the palace spent all of last week telling reporters that Harry hadn't accepted the invitation yet. It also says Harry was busy making his own plans to stay safe and that he formally accepted the offer over the weekend. Then, the statement says something that turns this from a small argument into a very big deal. It says it is disappointing that the offer was taken away because of the court case verdict coming on Tuesday. This is the first time Harry's side has openly mentioned the court case as the reason for the trouble. They even pointed out that the palace has known about the court date since last Thursday. They think it is unfair that the offer was taken away at the last second after they had already said yes. Now, before we decide who is right, we are going to do what I promised. We are going to read that one sentence from Harry's statement again very slowly. If you watch closely, you will see how he accidentally admits the palace was right. Here is the sentence. The Duke spent last week making alternative security arrangements. Once those arrangements were in place, he was able to formally accept the offer of accommodation for himself over the weekend. Let's break that down into small pieces. Remember, these are the words Harry's own team chose to use. First, it says he spent all last week looking for other options. This means that while the palace's Friday deadline was active, he was not answering them. He wasn't staying silent because he didn't understand the offer. He was staying silent because he was shopping around for something else. Second, it says he only accepted the offer once his other plans were finished. This means he was treating the King of England's invitation like a backup plan. It's like when you hold a toy in one hand while you look for a better one with the other. The most important part is the time. Harry's own statement says he accepted over the weekend. But the palace said the deadline was Friday. If you say yes on Saturday or Sunday, you are late for a Friday deadline. So even though Harry's team is trying to act like they are being treated unfairly, they are actually confirming that they missed the date. They are not saying the palace is lying about him being late. They are actually writing down the proof that he was late. This is the end of the first loop. I didn't need a secret spy or a person whispering at the palace to find this out. Harry's own paperwork proves the palace's timeline was correct. This has happened many times before with Harry's team. Their own papers often end up showing that they are wrong. It is like they are their own worst enemy because they keep giving out information that proves the other side is telling the truth. I want to be fair to everyone here. I will be fairer to Harry than the people who dislike him, and fairer to the palace than the people who always defend them. The story about the deadline being missed is true, but it is not the whole truth. There is a much bigger secret and it is more interesting. The story about the deadline and the cleaners being sent home is a good way for the palace to explain things without being too personal. But there is a giant elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. In English, when we say there is an elephant in the room, it means there is a big problem that everyone is ignoring. This elephant is wearing a judge's wig and holding a wooden hammer. Harry's statement was right about one thing: the court verdict was mentioned. Somewhere in the middle of all the talking, the palace told Harry's team that he couldn't stay because of the big court decision on Tuesday. Harry's side said this out loud, and the palace has not said it's a lie. They just prefer to talk about deadlines instead, so let's do something that neither side wants us to do. Let's put the two halves of the story together. The deadline explains why the palace had the right to say no, but the court verdict explains why the palace actually wanted to say no. My honest opinion is this: even if Harry had said yes on Thursday with a nice thank you note and some flowers, he still wouldn't have been allowed to stay. The moment the court said the verdict would come out this week, Harry's stay at the palace was doomed. This is because of the rules of how a king has to act. These rules have been around for hundreds of years. The king has to be impartial. That means he cannot take sides in any fight. He has to stay above all the arguments and court cases. This is because the courts are technically his courts. Justice is given out in his name. The newspapers are also a very important part of the country that the king is supposed to protect. Now imagine what would happen tomorrow. A judge is going to give a big decision in a case Harry brought against a major newspaper company. Harry has said his goal is to change how the British press works. No matter what the judge decides, it will be a huge news story. Now imagine if Harry was living inside Buckingham Palace when that news broke. If he wins, he might want to celebrate. He might give a speech or make a video with the famous palace walls behind him. If that happened, the whole world would see the king's house being used to celebrate a victory over the newspapers. It would look like the king was taking Harry's side. If Harry loses, it's not much better. It would look like the king's house was a hiding spot for someone who lost a big fight. There is no way a king can host someone on the same day his own courts are making a big decision about that person. Every smart person who gives the king advice knew this the second they saw the court date. The deadline was just the tool they used to say no, but the court case was the real reason. It is a bit sad because Harry has been fighting in courts for 6 years, but he doesn't seem to understand that his father is the one person in the whole country who cannot take a side. One famous reporter asked a good question today. He asked why a son can't just sleep in a room at his dad's house while a judge does his work. He even pointed out that Prince William has sued newspapers before and he didn't have to move out. That is a fair point, but there is a big difference. When William sued, it was for one specific thing, like when a magazine took private pictures of his wife. It was a small, private matter that was finished quickly. What Harry is doing is much bigger. He is fighting a 14-part war against the newspapers as a whole. He is not a working member of the royal family anymore, but he still carries the symbol of the king. A working royal protecting his wife's privacy is one thing, but someone who quit his job and is now fighting a giant battle against the press from inside the king's house on the day of the verdict is something totally different. It is like comparing one apple to a whole orchard on fire. If you want to see how easily all of this could have been avoided, we can imagine a boring version of this week. This is what a smart team would have done. In the boring version, you accept the offer weeks ago and say thank you. You fly to London quietly without telling everyone your plans. You do your charity work and spend 2 quiet nights at the palace. Maybe you and your dad have a cup of tea together for an hour and nobody even knows about it until months later. When the court verdict comes on Tuesday, your lawyers handle it at the court, and you stay far away from the palace so it doesn't look like you are using it for your own fame. That version of the week was possible. Everything was ready for it to happen, but it required one thing that Harry's team doesn't seem to have: the ability to do things quietly. Instead, every choice they made was about getting as much attention as possible. And getting a lot of attention during a week with a big court case is like carrying a lit match into a room full of fireworks. The boring version of the week ends with grandkids meeting their grandpa. The real version ends with an angry statement from a spokesperson. This leads us to the people who got hurt today. The first group is the media. Today showed us that the royal reporters are not just covering the story anymore. They are being played like a game by both sides. Think about what happened to that one reporter this morning. He was told by Harry's side that the palace stay was happening. He told the world and felt proud of his big secret. But 3 hours later, the palace told everyone he was wrong. His own friends at the same news station had to go on TV and take back the story. It was very embarrassing. Some people say the reporter was wrong to believe Harry's team. They say he should have checked with the palace first because Harry's team has changed their minds many times before. But the truth is more complicated. Both sides were telling their own version of the truth. Harry's side really believed that saying yes over the weekend should have been enough. The palace really believed that the deadline had passed and they were finished. The reporter wasn't telling a lie. He was just caught in the middle of a war where both sides were firing at each other. The lesson for reporters is that there is no longer just one true story. There are 2 different groups telling 2 different stories, and both of them are technically right in their own way. If a reporter only listens to one side, they are not really giving the news, they are just being used as a weapon. Last week, Harry's team gave out a whole plan for his trip, but then they changed it in less than a day. This made the charities he works with very confused and made the reporters look silly. Now, just 7 days later, the same thing happened with his place to stay. Twice in 2 weeks, the same pattern has happened. And patterns are how people decide if they can trust you or not. Trust is a very important thing. It is like a discount. If you tell the truth all the time, people believe you 100%. But if you change your story, people start to believe you less and less. After this week, many newsrooms have a new rule. They will never report anything from Harry's team unless the palace says it is true too. This lack of trust is not just in the news. People in Hollywood and big publishing companies are watching too. They see a team that cannot keep a plan for 24 hours. They see a family that cannot even agree on a place to sleep without fighting in public. In any business, that is the kind of partner you do not want to work with. A few weeks ago, a committee said Harry couldn't have government protection. But this week, something even bigger happened. He lost his credibility. Credibility is when people believe you are telling the truth. Once you lose that, it is very hard to get back. While the drama about where Harry would sleep was happening, another colder story was being told. Some people at the palace are starting to use a new word to describe all the drama with Harry: tiresome. Tiresome means something is very annoying and makes you feel tired of hearing about it. They said the king is very busy and will not change his plans to meet with Harry. They said it would be very hard to find time for a meeting because Harry keeps changing his plans at the last minute. You have to learn how to understand palace language. It is a special way of talking. When they say the king's diary is full of meetings all week, they are basically building a moat around him. A moat is a deep ditch filled with water that protects a castle. By saying he is too busy to meet, they are sending a message that Harry is not on the schedule. Even though a father could always find time for his son if he really wanted to, the palace is making it known that there is no official plan to meet. This means the big family reunion that everyone was hoping for might not happen. Harry's team says he is talking directly to his father, but the palace is working hard to keep the king away from the drama. The king has been through a lot lately, including his cancer treatment, and the palace wants to protect him from any more stress. On the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, Harry's team is in a bit of a mess. They say Harry is still coming, but his family's plans are not certain. He wanted to bring his children, Archie and Lilibet, to see their grandfather. But because he didn't get the security he wanted, he is now confused about what to do. He keeps changing his mind about who to bring and where to stay. One report said he was frantically looking for a place to stay at the very last second. But the most interesting detail was that Harry's security team gave him a list of options and told him how much each one would cost. This is a big part of the story that people often forget: money. It costs about $3 million a year for Harry to have private security. He used to have a lot of money from his big deals, but that money might be running out. He has been fighting for years to get the British taxpayers to pay for his security again. This would save him a lot of money every year, no matter where he goes in the world. When you look at it this way, everything that happened this month makes sense. He didn't want the palace room just because it was free. He wanted it because it would help him prove he needs official protection. He was indecisive because every different plan had a different price tag. His own team said he was having a tug of war between his heart and his head. But when you see him looking at spreadsheets of costs, it seems like the money part of his brain is winning the tug of war. Harry has traveled to dangerous places like war zones and countries with high crime without any drama. So why is London so dangerous for him? It is because London is the only place where he can win the prize of free security. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. People in royal circles are now having a big argument. Some people think it is time for severance. This means cutting all ties with Harry and treating him like he is not part of the royal family at all. They say he doesn't do any work for the king, so he shouldn't get any special treatment. They want to cut the cables and let him do his own thing without any help from the palace. This sounds like a simple solution, but other people say it is impossible. You cannot cut blood ties. Harry will always be the king's son. He knows a lot of secrets and he is very good at getting attention. If you cut him off completely, he might have even less to lose and could tell even more secrets. The palace's real plan seems to be containment. This means keeping one small door open like a private phone line to his father, but freezing everything else. They won't give in to his pressure and they won't be mean to him, but they will wait for him to run out of money or run out of things to complain about. Containment is a slow and hard process, but it might be the only way to handle the situation. Today we saw this containment plan in action, and it worked. The king has been very quiet for a long month. He has dealt with many accusations and a lot of pressure, all while being sick. He has continued to do his work with a smile on his face. Some people used to think the king was a man who would always give in to avoid a fight, but today he said no. He said no to the room after the deadline passed. He said no to changing his busy schedule. He said no to letting his house be used for a media war. It was the first time in 6 years that Harry's pressure campaign hit a solid wall instead of a soft cushion. And the thing about walls is that once you realize they won't move, you stop trying to push them. Today might be the day that everything changed for Harry's team. They might finally realize that the king is not going to fold anymore. You also have to think about the human side of the story. There are 2 little children, Archie and Lilibet, who haven't seen their grandfather in 4 years. Kids that young, 4 years is almost their whole life. This week was supposed to be the best chance for them to visit, but now it seems like that chance is gone. A grandfather who is fighting cancer and getting older has had to watch his chance to see his grandkids turn into a big argument about deadlines and lawyers. It is a very sad situation for those 3 people. They deserve better than what they got this week, and the adults who are responsible for this mess are on both sides of the ocean. But it is important to notice that only one side was talking about the cost of the trip in their meetings. While all this drama was happening, Harry's brother William and his wife Catherine were doing things very differently. Catherine released a beautiful new photo that everyone loved. William went on a famous American podcast about sports and had a great time laughing and talking. He reached a huge audience of young Americans and made the monarchy look normal and fun. This is exactly what Harry and Meghan were supposed to be doing in California. Their whole plan was to be the cool royals in America. But today, while Harry's team was fighting about bedsheets and deadlines, the future king simply walked in and won over the American crowd by being himself. The monarchy didn't have to fight to win. They just had to show up and be normal for a day. Tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. the big court verdict will finally be here. This is the last and biggest of Harry's wars against the newspapers. He is accusing them of doing 14 different bad things to get information. Some people think Harry might win some parts of the case but lose others because they happened too long ago. If he loses, it will be a huge blow to his whole mission. He would have lost his security case, his trip to see his family would have failed, and his war against the press would be over. Even if he wins a little bit, it will feel a bit empty because he won't be able to celebrate it from the palace. Tomorrow is going to be a very big and unpredictable day. No matter what happens, it will change everything. Think about all the ironies from today. A man who left Britain to get away from the press spent the whole day talking to his family through the press. A man who wants privacy had his secret money and travel plans printed in 3 different newspapers by his own team. A man who wants his family to respect him sent out a public statement about a private talk with his dad. And a man who wants to come home was kept out of his family's house, not by a villain, but by the rules of a lawsuit he chose to start himself. For 6 years, Harry has blamed everyone else for his problems. But this week, every single problem was caused by his own team and his own choices. There is a lesson here: if you build a machine to fight your family, you shouldn't be surprised when that machine keeps fighting them even when you don't want it to. Machines don't know when you change your mind, so let's close our 2 loops. Loop number 1 is the sentence. Harry's team admitted he was late for the deadline. They said he accepted over the weekend, but the deadline was Friday. Case closed. Loop number 2 is the clock. The 2:00 p.m. verdict tomorrow is the real reason the palace said no. The king cannot take a side in a court battle. A son who doesn't understand what it means to be a king. Harry's own lawsuit is what really locked the door. He didn't lose his room because of a mean courtier. He lost it because he sued the hinges off the door. Tomorrow, when the clock strikes 2:00, everything will change again. Whether he wins or loses, I will be here to tell you what it really means. We all have front row seats to the end of this story. Whatever you do, do not be late to see what happens next.